The evening light bruised the town's single street, throwing long shadows across warped boards and crooked signs. Dust drifted like smoke, stinging eyes, filling mouths. On the porch of the general store, a young woman sat hunched, her back against a splintered post. In her arms, a baby cried, a thin, piercing sound that cut through the laughter spilling from the saloon across the road. No one stopped. Men shouldered past, boots hammering the boards. A pair of women hurried by with baskets, whispering sharp as knives. To the townsfolk, she was already condemned. They called her liar, harlot witch. Said she'd cursed her husband to an early grave. Said the child in her arms bore no rightful name. Rumor was enough. In this place, rumor was law. Her dress hung torn, stained with milk and dust. The child pawed weakly at her, lips raw from hunger. She pulled him close, whispering words only he could hear. On her wrist, red and raw, was the mark of rope, cut free that very morning when the sheriff spat at her feet. "Go on," he'd said, "right where you land." The porch creaked. She looked up, heart lurching. A man stood there, broad-shouldered, coat worn thin, hat brimmed shadowing his scarred face. Silent, still watching. The townsfolk called him cursed too. Silent John, the widower rancher. The baby's cries faltered, as if even he felt the weight of that silence. And still John stayed. The reluctant hand, John didn't speak at first. He leaned against the post, struck a match, and lit a cigar. The flare lit his scar, then dulled to a slow ember. He watched the street, not her, as if measuring the weight of stepping forward. "You been here long?" His voice was gravel, low, a man and used to questions. She swallowed. "Since they cut me loose." Her wrist ached. The baby whimpered, too tired to wail. She rocked him, whispering, but her arms shook with exhaustion. The child's lips searched for milk that wasn't there. John ground his cigar out against the post, the wood hissing under the ash. Then he crouched to her level, slow, boots creaking. His eyes fell to the rope burn, swollen and angry. He didn't ask. He already knew. "I got milk in my place," he said flat, steady. "Won't last the night out here." Her breath hitched. "What?" It came sharp, raw, more a wound than a question. His gaze held hers, unflinching. "'Cause leaving a child to starve ain't something I can sit with." The words weren't tender. They weren't promise. Just truth. She hesitated, torn between fear and need. Around them, the saloon doors banged open, laughter spilling sharp, cruel. Her shame was a public sport. John stood and offered his hand. Not gently, not pushing. Just there, rough and open. A choice. Her fingers trembled as they reached for his. Through the street, she rose slowly, the baby pressed to her chest. John's hand steadied her, then slipped away, leaving only the ghost of rough skin against her palm. Together, they stepped off the porch. The street stilled. Men leaned from doorways. Dice clattered to a stop on saloon tables. Even the dogs went quiet. She felt the stairs burn hotter than the sun, a brand across her back. John walked steady, each step slow, deliberate. His coat swung at his sides, revolver glinting at his hip. He didn't speak, didn't look at them, but his silence carried weight heavier than any curse. From the saloon, a voice rang out. Silent John's got himself a witch. Laughter followed, jagged and mean. Someone spat in the dust. The woman faltered, clutching her baby tighter. His weak cry slipped out, and she hushed him quick, heart pounding. John stopped mid-stride. He didn't turn, didn't raise his voice. He just stood, shoulders squared, the kind of stillness that dares a man to test it. The laughter thinned, uneasy, and then a child's voice cut the air. From near the well, a boy no older than 10 called, clear as a bell, "Leave her be." His mother yanked him back, scolding in a hiss, but the words hung there, sharp and trembling. The crowd shifted, some faces flinching, others looking away. For the first time, she lifted her head, just a sliver, but in it, a breath of defiance slipped through the cracks. John walked on, and no one stood in his way. The ranch gate they left the last shack behind, the town shrinking into a smear of dust and voices. The road stretched empty, broken only by the groan of fences and the rattle of dry weeds. The baby stirred faintly, his breath rasping soft against her collarbone. Far ahead, a lantern swung on a post, crooked, weathered, marking the edge of land. John stopped there, unlatched the chain, and pushed the gate wide. "Ain't much," he said, his voice flat, almost apologetic. "But it'll hold." Beyond the gate lay pasture gone brittle with drought, a barn leaning on tired beams, and a cabin hunched low against the wind. A cow bawled somewhere out of sight, lonely and hollow. The woman hesitated. Her feet ached, her arms numb from carrying the child, but still she lingered at the threshold. What if this was another kind of trap? A man's kindness had turned before, so had a whole town's. John looked back, eyes steady, unreadable. He gave the smallest nod. "The choice is yours." The baby whimpered, and that decided her. She stepped through. The air inside the gate was quieter, heavier. Not the cruel silence of watchful eyes, but the honest stillness of land that had known storms, hoofbeats, and graves. She drew in a shaky breath. John opened the cabin door. Firelight spilled out, carrying the smell of wood smoke and beans left cold. He stood aside, letting her enter first. Her rope-burned wrist throbbed, but for the first time that day, the air did not choke her. The first night, the cabin was plain, built by hands that cared for strength, not comfort. A table scarred with knife cuts. A single cot by the fire. A chair worn thin. The air held the smells of smoke, leather, and loneliness. She stood just inside, clutching her baby, uncertain. His face pressed her dress, lips searching, hungry. He whimpered, weak, and she rocked him though her arms trembled. John crossed to a cupboard, pulled a tin pail, and lit a lantern. "Milk's out back," he said simply, then stepped into the night. When the door shut, she sagged against the wall, breath catching. Her eyes swept the room. No trace of a woman's hand, no softness, only the hard lines of a man living alone. The baby's cries rose, sharp in the stillness. She hushed him, whispering, "Mama's here." "Hush now," though her voice cracked with exhaustion. The door opened again. John returned with the pail, steam curling faint in the cold air. He poured careful into a cup, slid it toward her without meeting her eyes. Her pride wavered, but the baby's hunger was stronger. She let him drink, his little mouth greedy against her finger. The sound of it filled the cabin, alive, fragile. John turned to the fire, giving her the dignity of not watching. His shoulders seemed to ease as the child quieted. "You take the cot," he muttered, closer to the fire. "I'll see to the barn." Before she could protest, he was gone, lantern swinging into the dark. For the first time, she lay on something soft. For the first time, the baby slept warm. Shadows in the firelight, the baby slept at last, heavy and warm against her chest. The fire burned low, the flames licking softly at the last of the wood. Shadows climbed the walls like old ghosts. She tried closing her eyes, but every time she did, the rope came back, the rough fibers biting, the sheriff spit on her cheek, the crowd silence. Her breath quickened, and she forced her eyes open again. The chair scraped. She startled. John had returned, lantern dimmed in his hand. He sat on the sill and leaned against the doorframe, scarred face half in shadow. "You're not sleeping," he said, voice low. Her throat tightened. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear them." He studied her a moment, then nodded, as though he understood. He dragged the chair closer to the fire, sat with his arms resting heavy on his knees. "What do they call you?" she asked quietly, more to fill the silence than out of boldness. "John," he said after a beat. "That's enough." She almost smiled. "Silent John," the name the town used. His eyes flicked to her sharp. "I hear fine." Her cheeks warmed, but she didn't look away. The fire cracked between them, filling the hush. The baby stirred, and she hummed a faint lullaby. John's gaze lingered, unreadable. Then he rose, poured a finger of whiskey into a cup, and set it before her. "For your nerves." She shook her head. "If I drink, I'll sleep too deep, and he might need me." John watched her wrist, raw with the rope's mark. His jaw clenched. "Ain't right what they done." The words hung heavy. "Simple." True. For the first time, she felt the silence shift, no longer empty, but guarding. Dawn and reckoning gray light crept through the cracks of the shutters, laying thin stripes across the floor. She stirred on the cot, stiff from holding the baby all night. He still breathed steady, his face slack with the deep sleep of hunger finally eased. John sat in the chair by the fire, hat tilted forward, chest rising slow. He hadn't truly slept. She could tell by the way his shoulders tensed even in rest. A man who never let go of watch. She rose carefully, smoothing her wrinkled dress. The baby whimpered once, then quieted, his head tucked under her chin. For the first time in days, she whispered to herself, "We lived through the night." John lifted his hat, eyes dark with tiredness but sharp. "You'll need water for the boy," he said, standing. His voice was thick, rough with sleep, but steady as stone. She blurted before she could stop herself, "Why are you helping me?" He paused at the door, hand on the latch. The silence stretched until it ached. Finally, he said, "Because I know what it is to lose what you can't get back." Her chest tightened. He stepped outside, boots crunching in the dirt. Through the shutters, she watched him cross the yard, a dog trailing close, the land wide and brittle around him. The baby stirred, and she kissed his brow. "We'll try, little one. Just one more day." But she knew the town's memory was long. Dawn brought not just safety, but reckoning. The town presses back by midday. The road beyond the ranch stirred with riders. They slowed as they passed, eyes sharp, voices low, dust curling up behind their horses. She watched from the window, heart in her throat, the baby clutched close. Their faces carried the town's verdict. Her guilt, John's folly for sheltering her. One rider she knew too well, the deputy with the rusted badge. He reined in at the fence, smirk twisting his mouth. "Well, look at that," he drawled. Silent John's keeping himself a witch. His partner chuckled, spitting into the dirt. The woman stiffened, hands trembling on the baby's back. John stepped from the barn, wiping dust from his hands. He didn't hurry, didn't reach for the revolver on his hip. He just stood, shoulders square, gaze fixed on the deputy. "You know what she is," the deputy pressed. "Trouble. You keep her, and it'll stick to you. Town won't let it pass." John's voice was low, steady as iron. "Ain't the town's concern what I keep." The deputy leaned forward in the saddle, but before he could spit another word, a wagon rattled past. An old woman in a frayed shawl leaned out, voice sharp as a whip. "Leave her be." Her driver tugged the reins quick, but the words already hung in the air. The deputy's smirk faltered. His partner shifted uneasy. John never moved, and silence pressed heavier than any gun drawn. At last, the riders turned their horses, spitting curses into the dust. The woman sagged against the window frame, breath shaking. John glanced back only once. "Best you stay close to the cabin," he said, then walked on as though nothing had happened. But she knew the town wasn't done. The rope burned that evening. The baby slept curled against her chest while the fire crackled low. The cabin was quiet but for the wind against the boards. Still, her wrist ached, the raw welt left by rope. She rubbed at it without thinking, but the pain only deepened, as if the town's judgment still clung to her skin. John came in from the barn, shoulders heavy with dust. His eyes dropped to her wrist, then back to her face. "Let me see." She pulled her sleeve down. "It's nothing." His voice sharpened. "Ain't nothing. Rope will rot the flesh if you let it." Reluctantly, she held out her arm. His hands were rough, scarred, but careful as he lifted the sleeve. The welt was swollen, angry red. He frowned at it, not at her. He crossed to the stove, set water to heat, then returned with a rag. He pressed it warm against the wound, wrapped it firm, steady. She stared at the bandage, whispering, "They wanted it seen. To shame me." John's eyes flicked toward the fire. "Then we'll see it burned." He fetched a length of old rope from the barn, tossed it into the flames. It caught fast, fire devouring fiber, until only black ash curled on the hearth. He stood watching until it was gone. The woman held her child closer. The smell of smoke filled the cabin, bitter but clean. The rope on her wrist was hidden, the rope in the fire destroyed. For the first time, the shame no longer felt hers alone. The mounting anger by morning, smoke from the burned rope still lingered faint in the dirt yard. It carried farther than either of them wished. By noon, riders slowed along the ranch road, their eyes hard, their whispers sharper than spurs. The woman watched from the window, clutching her baby, knowing the town's shame was turning into anger. John came in from the pasture, dust streaking his coat. He didn't mention the riders, but his silence was thick, heavy. He washed at the basin, then sat at the table, a man settling into storm weather. "They'll come," she said quietly, her voice trembling though she tried to hold it steady. "They won't let me stay." He poured coffee, black and steaming. "Leche." Her eyes burned. "You don't understand. I do." His gaze fixed on the cup, but his voice was iron. "They've taken near everything else from me. They won't take you. Not while I draw breath." The baby shifted, a soft cry escaping. She hushed him, whispering, but her eyes stayed on John. "They'll kill you for it." At that, he finally met her gaze. "Maybe, but a man's got to choose what he'll carry to his grave. I won't carry turning my back." The room held still. The fire ticked, a crow called from the fence line, the sound cutting lonely and thin. Her shame cracked just slightly. Straightening her back, she whispered, "Then I won't run. If they come, I'll stand." John gave the smallest nod. Not comfort, not promise, just recognition. The gathering by late afternoon. The dust on the horizon thickened with riders. One by one, they drew up near John's fence line, horses snorting, eyes sharp. Men from the saloon, the deputy with his rusted badge, even a few farmers who owed more to gossip than truth. The town had gathered, and its weight pressed heavy in the dry air. The woman stood at the cabin window, baby in her arms. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the child would feel it. They had come for her shame, her supposed curse. And now John stood between. He stepped out of the barn slow, steady, coat swinging, revolver low on his hip but untouched. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. His silence alone forced them to quiet. The deputy spat in the dust. "This ain't your fight, John. Hand her over, and it ends." John's scar caught the sun as he raised his head. "She ain't yours to take." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A man shifted uneasily in his saddle. Another cleared his throat, but said nothing. From the cabin's edge, the baby gave a cry, thin, piercing, alive. The sound cut through the standoff sharper than any gunshot. An old ranch hand near the back muttered, "Ain't no curse in a hungry child." His voice carried further than he meant, and others turned, frowning, uncertain. The wall cracked. Not broken yet, but cracked. John didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood, and the silence weighed heavier than all their anger. The crack the air turned sharp, every breath dry with dust. Horses stamped, riders shifted, voices low and restless. The deputy's hand twitched near his holster, his smirk stretching thin. "Last chance, John," he barked. "You can't stand against a whole town." John didn't flinch. He stood as if carved from the land itself, silence pouring off him thicker than words. His hand rested loose at his side, not on his gun. The woman, watching through the window, clutched her baby tight. Her wrist burned under its bandage, as if the rope's ghost still tested her. Then movement. From the crowd, a boy wriggled free of his father's grip, the same child who'd spoken once before. He stepped into the open, chin trembling, but his voice rang clear. "She ain't done nothing wrong." The father cursed, yanking at him, but the words had already struck. The boy's small defiance hung in the air like church bells on a windless day. The deputy's sneer faltered. Men muttered, some looking at their boots, others at John. The old ranch hand who had spoken before spat into the dirt, louder this time. "Town's got blood enough on its hands. You want more? Take it yourselves." The crowd wavered. They had come for judgment, but judgment fractured under shame. John finally spoke, his voice low, steady. "This land's mine. She stays. Any man who wants different, step forward." No one moved. The horses snorted, restless. Dust curled around them like smoke. And slowly, one by one, the riders turned their reins. Aftermath, the riders peeled away slow, their horses kicking up clouds that hung in the evening light. No shots fired, no rope thrown, but their leaving carried no peace. Only the bitter weight of something unfinished. John stood at the fence until the last rider vanished behind the ridge. His face didn't change, but his shoulders carried the heaviness of a man who knew the town would remember. They always did. Inside the cabin, the woman sank onto the cot, clutching her baby close. Relief and fear tangled in her chest. Relief that the crowd had turned, fear that next time they might not. She kissed her child's brow, whispering prayers too soft to name. The door opened. John stepped in, boots dragging dust. He hung his hat, washed his hands at the basin, then sat at the table like a man returned from burying something. "They'll be back," she said. Her voice shook, though she tried to steady it. He nodded once. "Maybe tomorrow, maybe a month, but they'll come." She stared at the fire, watching embers collapse into ash. "I should go before they do. I don't want her land marked by me." John looked at her then, his eyes dark, unflinching. "Ain't your shame to carry anymore? Rope's burned. What's left is ours to bury." Her wrist throbbed under the cloth bandage. She pressed the baby closer, a tear slipping unbidden down her cheek. For the first time since the porch, the weight of survival felt less like exile, more like choice. The burial night fell heavy, the sky a black dome pricked with cold stars. The fire inside the cabin dimmed to embers. John took a shovel from the barn, its handle worn smooth from years of work, and carried it to the edge of the yard. The woman followed, baby pressed against her chest, his small weight anchoring her trembling steps. In John's other hand, he carried a tin. Inside, the blackened remains of the rope he had burned. The smell of char still clung, bitter and acrid. He stopped beneath a mesquite tree, its branches crooked like bent arms. "Here," he said simply. Then he drove the shovel into the dirt, cutting through dry earth. The sound rang sharp in the night. She stood close, watching as he dug a narrow trench. When he stepped back, he handed her the tin. Her fingers shook. For a long moment, she just stared at it. The ashes of what had marked her, the town's judgment, turned to dust. Slowly, she knelt and tipped the tin. The blackened rope fell into the hollow, disappearing into the earth. John covered it with soil, each shovelful steady, final. He tamped the dirt down with the flat of the blade. No words, no prayers. Just silence, heavy and clean. The woman pressed her cheek to her baby's head. Her wrist ached under its bandage. But as she looked at the small mound of earth, the sting felt less like shame and more like scar. Proof, not curse. For the first time, she whispered into the night, "It's done." John's nod was small, but certain. The days after the ranch settled into a rhythm. Morning sun spilled over the brittle pasture, cows bawling in the distance. John worked the land, his silence steady as ever, while she kept to the cabin, tending the baby, mending what she could with tired hands. The days were plain, but in them grew something strange, safety. The baby gained weight, his cries stronger, his cheeks flushed with life. She found herself humming as she worked, songs she thought had been beaten out of her. But the town's shadow stretched long. Riders still passed slow along the fence, watching, whispering. Each hoofbeat reminded her that safety here was borrowed time. John never spoke of it, but she saw the way his shoulders tightened when the dust rose on the horizon. One afternoon, as she drew water from the trough, she caught him watching her wrist. The bandage was gone now, the skin raw but healing. The mark was permanent, a scar that would never fully fade. For once, she didn't hide it. "It's still there," she said softly. John's eyes held hers. "Scars ain't for hiding. They tell what's been endured." She lowered her gaze, but her heart beat with something steadier than fear. The rope had been buried, but the scar remained. Proof of what she'd survived. Proof she was still here. Section 16. The quiet proof spring came thin, carried on winds that smelled of rain, but gave little. Still, one morning, she carried the baby to the mesquite tree where the rope lay buried. The soil was cracked, but she pressed her hand to it, whispering a prayer too soft for John to hear. From her apron, she drew a handful of seeds, beans, saved from the last of the stores. She knelt and pressed them into the dirt above the grave of the rope, covering them gently. John watched from the porch, arms crossed. He didn't ask what she was doing. He didn't need to. Weeks later, green shoots broke through the earth, small and stubborn. The baby reached for them with chubby fingers, laughing, his voice carrying on the wind. The scar on her wrist caught the sunlight, pale but unhidden. The town might never forgive. The whispers might never end. But here, under the sky, proof had grown from ash and dirt. Not triumph, but survival. And survival was enough.